This is Appalling News. I'm Paul Chatto. This story comes from Canada's East Coast. CTV, one of our major television broadcasters, fired a regional news reporter, and she posted this "I'm in a car" whinge video on TikTok. As we are all well aware, complaining about your recent dismissal in a public video is always a great way to secure future employment. But let's dissect this video to find out why she allegedly got fired.
CTV News fired me after speaking up for Palestine.
Her opening line is, "CTV News fired me for speaking up for Palestine." Okay, that didn't take long. We know right off the bat that's not true, but that will be the core of her argument, I'm sure. Let's proceed.
And as disappointed as I am, I'm not shocked. I was the only Palestinian person in the media in the Atlantic region and the only Middle Eastern woman in their newsroom.
And I'm not shocked. I was the only Palestinian in the Atlantic region and the only Middle Eastern woman in their newsroom. She's not playing games, flashing her minority and sex status cards. She is going after the man, and it's going to get ugly.
My existence should have been important during a time of genocide against my own people. But instead they decided to fire me.
My existence should have been important in time of genocide against my own people, but instead they decided to fire me. Well, darling, you've chosen to leave your homeland, come to Canada, where we have domestic news that is more important to your viewing audience than the war in the Middle East. Yes, your pain is as real as that of Ukrainians living here. If you wanted to report on the war, then perhaps you should have gotten a job at Al Jazeera. Also, you clearly don't know the definition of genocide.
There was absolutely no regard that I'm witnessing my own people getting killed.
There was no regard for witnessing my own people getting killed. In a war, people get killed. She seems to have forgotten about the other side getting killed. The war between Israel and terrorist organizations in Gaza and the West Bank has been switching between simmer and boiling for decades. This war is not unique. This should not be news to her.
Here's a rundown of what happened. I made a comment during an interview where I was asked if Jews can exist in a free Palestine, to which I had replied saying, Jews can exist, the Zionist ideology cannot. The State of Israel cannot. Logically, a free Palestine cannot exist with an occupation, or with a state that was labeled an apartheid state by human rights organizations.
Okay, lots going on here. First off, she should be given credit for not being ambiguous about the fact she clearly states that Israel does not have a right to exist. Zionist ideology means wishing to live in the ancestral homeland. That's it. Occupation is just another way of disavowing the existence of Israel. And the apartheid state comment is irrelevant, except in her Palestine utopian fantasy, all Jews will be looking forward to the same freedoms they presently enjoy in Gaza and Ramallah.
My firing took less than 24 hours after a Twitter thread had started labeling me anti-Semitic. When asked why I was fired, I was told that I broke the collective agreement, but both Bell and CTV would not specify as to what I exactly violated.
So, she got fired within 24 hours after Twitterers went after her. Management told her she broke the collective agreement. I don't have a copy of it with me, but I'm fairly certain it would have had a clause that on-air personalities cannot ask for the immolation of another country. Maybe keep that conversation at home with your family while you're eating hummus and kanafa. Let's keep going.
This infuriates me as to the fact that during my time at CTV, I had many reports to HR about anti-Palestinian racism.
This infuriates me, as that during my time at CTV I had many reports to HR about anti-Palestinian racism. Yes, I can imagine. I'm sure you were the darling of the HR department, and your frequent appearances provided endless joy. This really smells of Karen. But she does not elaborate what she meant by anti-Palestine racism. As it's clear, she is a very privileged Gen Zer. I would hazard a guess that any report that put her people in a bad light would have triggered her. Recounting the initial massacre of Israelis on October 7 would have been considered by her to be anti-Palestinian racism, I'm certain.
And I had explicitly told my managers many times on different occasions that, hey, your newsroom is extremely uncomfortable for me, and my existence is nothing but a box to be checked. I am consistently uncomfortable working with certain individuals who consistently made me feel uncomfortable as a person of color. Nothing was done, and I did not matter for CTV, as expected. I was also one of, about 4 people of color in the entire company, so I should not be surprised either.
Here she is now aiming her missile launchers at the usual targets, as I predicted. Made me feel uncomfortable as a person of color. Yes, the excessive rouge and lip liner certainly added color. Why not add some critical race theory victimhood? Accuse everyone else but take responsibility for your own actions? Never going to happen.
Both Bell and CTV had told me that I needed to be impartial about the genocide in Gaza. Impartial about a genocide? Impartial about kids being slaughtered or hospitals being bombed?
Yes. In this one-sided statement, you have clearly demonstrated your lack of impartiality. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Let's just assume that I needed to be impartial. My manager at CTV, one of my managers, let's call him John. John had asked me about a statement made by someone I know about October 7th, where they said that the attacks by Hamas should not be looked at as a terrorist act, rather but as an act of resistance. Okay, that was the statement. Johnny felt the need to ask me if I agree with that statement and if I think that the attacks are a terroristic acts. For why? For why do you need to know what I think about Hamas? Did you not just tell me to be impartial? It makes no sense to me.
Now this part was totally made up. I've worked at newsrooms, and no one would ever ask such a question of a colleague. Hey, you, the black guy working for us, what's your thoughts about the Ugandan military killing homosexuals? It would never happen. This was a lie.
Freedom of speech does not exist for people like me or people of color. It doesn't.
Freedom of speech does not exist for people like me or people of color. Now she's just trolling for victimhood scraps and scraping the bottom of the dish of shishbarak. Once again, I'm sure her employment contract made clear what kinds of things she could talk about as a representative of the company. Freedom of speech does not exist for private corporations. I like how she added, or people of color, letting her have some of that extra BLM sauce.
Palestinians continue to be silenced, and I will not stand for it anymore. CTV has failed me as a Palestinian employee and continues to fail the Palestinian community as a whole. That's it.
It sure is. I can't decide if her response is cultural or Gen Z privilege, maybe a bit of both. Nice car you got. I do not doubt for a moment that she is suffering from what's going on back home. But as I said, it's not CTV's job to cover the Middle East or to be sensitive to any community. And she is clearly extremely biased, as any Israeli might be in the same situation. But when you are a reporter, you must be impartial. And for that alone, her dismissal was justified. And I'm certain HR was glad to see her sorry, people of color, ungrateful wretch ass out the door. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments. This has been Appalling News, and that's the way it is.